Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Here we are. This midweek, this mid-morning of the middle day of the week check-in. I've got my Last Supper artistic cup here with a little bit of coffee in it. Last of my coffee for the day as I get ready for the rest of the day. Hope your week is going well, and thanks to all those who spend these few minutes every week with me. We've kind of been meandering, that's the best word I can think of it, through the gospel according to Matthew's account of the life and ministry of Jesus. We're in Matthew 14, so that's kind of the midpoint, sort of, 28 chapters in Matthew. We're in 14 into 15, and last week we talked about an incredible miracle, the one outside of the resurrection, the only one that's recorded in all four of the accounts of Jesus' life, and that's the feeding of the 5,000. And after that, this is what Matthew records. He says, immediately, so this is after they've fed 5,000. The previous verse is the number who ate were 5,000, not counting women and children. It says, immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Now, this is an interesting thing. It's just kind of a little interlude here before another pretty incredible miracle. We'll probably talk about that next week. But this one is really, these few verses, maybe you're wondering why I picked them out. And you could see Jesus going to pray. But I think more than that, there's some interesting background to this. Because one of the things that more and more in my life, as I'm reading the scriptures and studying the Bible, which is kind of my job of sorts, is to be better in it, is I realize that too often I have seen and grabbed verses and neglected to see where they flow in the story. So I want us to take a bit of a step back and see why Jesus immediately tells the disciples, get in the boat, and immediately disperses the crowd so he can get up there. Because one of the things we didn't cover that happens in the very beginning of John chapter 14 is Jesus' cousin is executed. Jesus' cousin, you may be familiar with, we know as John the Baptist. His Aunt Elizabeth was pregnant at the same time Mary was pregnant with Jesus. Mary went to visit Elizabeth when they were both pregnant, and there's this remarkable moment where Elizabeth recognizes, though Mary hasn't told her that she's pregnant, which is just remarkable, and knows that it's going to be the Messiah, because the baby, John the Baptist, in her womb, says leaps, which sounds pretty uncomfortable if I think about it, but nonetheless. So Mary and Elizabeth had a very intimate relationship from when they were both pregnant, from way back. And so Jesus and John the Baptist, I think it's reasonable to suspect, knew each other because their moms were so connected. And what happens is John the Baptist, being John the Baptist, doesn't mind just telling you what he thinks. And he said that to the king, Herod the Tetrarch, about his marital situation and the immorality that was there. And so Herod's wife wasn't happy about it, convinced her daughter to dance. Actually, Herod invited the daughter to dance, and the mom convinced her daughter, when Herod said, I'll give you anything, to ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. And so that's exactly what happened. John the Baptist is executed, beheaded by Herod. And Jesus learns of this. And when he learns of it, one thing we didn't talk about last week with the feeding of the 5,000 says when Jesus heard what had happened, meaning that he heard John the Baptist, his cousin, had been executed, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. So Jesus gets this news, which was probably very much overwhelming for him, probably a moment of grief as this person that's important to him. We know when Lazarus, one of his friends from Bethany, dies, he weeps, so maybe wouldn't be a stretch to say here in this moment, he's grief-stricken. And he wants to get off by himself. But the problem is a whole bunch of people figure out where he's going and they follow him on foot. He's in a boat. The crowd follows him on foot. And what happens is he sees them, he has compassion on them, and he begins healing their sick all day long until the evening. And it's in the evening when the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 happened. So Jesus gets this bad news, tries to get off by himself to process it and to deal with his grief with his disciples. He can't because of the crowd. The crowd gets there. He does this incredible miracle, meets their needs. And what does he want to do? Well, that's where he pick up. Immediately. Why immediately? Because Jesus, at this point, I'm going to suggest, is emotionally and physically exhausted. He was human, after all. He was God in the flesh, 100% God, but he's also 100% human. And as we see elsewhere, he has emotions. He, as a human being, he would have that emotion, though he knows the future and all of that. And he's subject to physical limitations of tired and rest. And so after this very long period of time, he finally can get off by himself. And notice what he does. He sends his disciples away, get in the boat, go away. He draws up on the mountainside after sending the crowd away, and he goes to pray. Now, that's the part I want to talk about. The context to me is fascinating because it reminds us what we see Jesus doing, that he understood better than any of us probably his need for communion, for prayer with the Father. In fact, several times the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, record Jesus doing that. In fact, Luke says in chapter 5, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray. This was his habit. This is what he would do constantly. He would pull off by himself. Certainly, this would be an ideal time to get off by yourself and process all of your physical and emotional tiredness and weariness and grief with the Father. And Jesus does this. In fact, he did it enough that his disciples, on seeing him pray, said, Jesus, would you teach us to pray? They saw his example and knew it was so important to them that they wanted to know how to pray like him. Prayer for him was very important. And as one person said, I wish I could find it. I tried to find it. I don't know if I ever could put across the quote. It's attributed in different ways. It's kind of one of those maybe just sayings by now that goes something like this. If Jesus, the Son of God, who is holy, needed to have time alone with the Father, how much more do you and I, who are, well, unholy, need to make time to do the same in our own lives? It is a convicting example he sets. If Jesus, our Savior, needed time to pray, though he was perfect and though he was God in the flesh and there was all the things we know about him that would be our Savior, how much more do we need time? And so that's been something that I've been convicted about, and this is just a reminder to make time to get away. Now I'm talking about real time. I'm not talking about, I pray before every meal, or right when I lay down, now I lay me down to sleep as you're drifting off to sleep. Can't keep your eyes awake. No, I'm talking about, do you set time aside to pray, to honestly commune with God, to be honest? If Jesus pulled this time aside, I'm sure he had a moment to pour out his grief and sorrow over the loss of his cousin. I'm sure he poured out his tiredness to God. I'm sure he poured out the needs of many of the people he had seen and healed that day, and maybe some that he knew of. I'm sure he poured out the needs of his disciples and all of this, that he just took this time, this concentrated time with God to pray. It is his practice. It is his example. And it's a reminder to me, and I wanted it to be a reminder to you, that just like Jesus, sometimes life is overwhelming. Life is busy. We have a lot of stuff to do. He had just spent a whole day healing and then a miracle to follow. Sometimes life is difficult with sorrow and grief and pain, and he had just experienced that. And the best response we can have isn't anything less than spending time with God, following the example of Jesus to spend time in prayer. I would encourage you to consider that. Maybe you would want to read again the way Jesus taught his disciples to pray, that Our Father which art in heaven, that traditional Lord's Prayer as we call it. Or you can even see the longest prayer we have recorded of Jesus is what I like to call his high priestly prayer that he gave with his disciples at the Last Supper, John 17. It might be worthwhile for you to take some time and read through those and see how Jesus taught us to pray, and this one example we have of his actual prayer. But more than the reading and learning, it's the doing, isn't it? It's actually finding time to spend in prayer. I've got an app. Denise found it and she shared it with me, and I've been using it every morning and most evenings to help me focus my mind on prayer. And I encourage you, find a tool like that. The app we use is called Lectio 365. It's a pretty interesting app. Most of the speakers have Scottish accents, so since we just got back from the UK, it has its own special appeal to us that we use. But there's a variety of ways. Whatever way you choose, I would encourage you to find time to get alone and quiet before God and follow the example of Jesus, to often withdraw by yourself and pray. And I think the more I do that in my life, I shouldn't say I think, I know, the better I'm able to handle the amazing demands and difficulties that life throws at us. So that's my encouragement to you this Wednesday, this week. Also want to encourage you, as always, to join us on Sunday. We have service 9 a.m. right here in our church. I'd love to have you be here if you're in Key Largo, or you can join us online. We put it on our church website. We're trying to work on that Facebook thing, but we're just running into bumps along the way. But we'll keep working on it. Hopefully we can get it there. But it's on our website, fbckl.com, and you click media, and it'll take you to stream our Sunday service. You can watch it live, or you can actually watch an archive on our Sunday service video archives. We have the last, year or two of services there. If you want to catch up on something, or you missed one and you want to hear, great resource. But mostly we encourage you to take time to worship together with other believers, and then find time by yourself to pray. If it was good enough for Jesus, no, that's really corny. It's good enough for you, of course, but you get the point, and I think Jesus sets the example. All right, well, that's about enough for me today. I got several things to do, starting a new class tonight, so I got to finish up prep for that. I have to go to a couple of appointments too. So I'm going to let you get to your day, because I've sure got to get back to mine. Thanks for spending these times with us, these few minutes with me today, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.